Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today is going to be my full review and discussion on this very compelling Reate PL XF. This overall, I have to say, is a very good knife. It's a really interesting offering from Reate. I love the lock. I love the design. There are a lot of things that I really enjoy about this. There are a couple things I wish were different. I'm going to talk about those as well, beginning with the name. Okay, I've got to, the very first thing I've got to say is PLXF is really annoying to remember. It's even more annoying to say, and I'm going to have to say it a whole bunch of times in this video, which is ticking me off already. Also, there's a PL something else, XT maybe? I'm kind of guessing here. That's the smaller version of this, but that just adds to my confusion, okay? So my brain just cannot handle codes. Just give me names. Call this thing, Henry, call it the capybara or the emu or whatever you want to call it. Just call it something so that I don't have to remember a series of letters with a dash in between. That is so annoying. The next thing that I wish about this knife that kind of just gets to me a little bit, and not super related to the actual performance, is the size. I wish this were a little bit bigger. There's already a small version of this knife. And so why not, if you're going to make a big one, swing for the fences and make it nice and big, make it substantial. I'll throw a ruler in here so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, we've got 8 inches overall, 3.5 inches on the blade, which is a moderately sized folder. I'll throw this up beside a para 2, and I hope you can see this is smaller than a para 2. I would have liked to see this like just a little bigger than a para 2. All right, not the end of the world, okay, but it would have been nice, since there's already a small version, to see one just a teeny bit bigger. Now, there are a number of variants of this, and they don't all weigh the same amount, but I'll quickly show you what this one weighs. Hello. We've got 5.4 ounces here, which again, for a smaller knife, is a little hefty. Now, there are a number of things that account for that. Let me first point out the blade stock is a little thicker. The handle is quite a bit thicker. It is milled out internally to save weight. This is also the one with aluminum scales. The G10 weighs a little bit different, and I can't remember, but it might be a little bit lighter, but not enough to bother with. All right. So that's size and weight, and this is a little bit more noticeable than some of your knives in your collection when you carry it, because it's a little bit thick, okay? This is not a slim little knife. If I throw in, here's the Vosteed Thunderbird, here is the Civivi Primatrox. All right, so those are a couple of other examples. The Para 2 is already a pretty thick knife, and I'll even throw it in here, and you'll see that it's thicker than the Para 2 as well. Okay, so it's a little bit thicker. Now, that doesn't bother me that much. I'm just a little bit selective about when I carry this knife, what I've got on in terms of my pants when I drop this thing in the pocket. Okay, so it's a dense little folder. Now, let me go ahead and get into the specific parts of the knife, beginning the way I normally do with the blade. And so the blade on this is good with a couple of little hiccups. So first of all, I love the design. I love the overall geometry. So this is a nice high flat grind. It's nice and thin behind the edge, and this cuts pretty darn well. I'll give you the old toilet paper tube test. It cuts that toilet paper roll pretty nicely, and you can see it bites into that. That's not always an easy thing to achieve, but it really catches that really well. So it's nice and thin. I've got a pretty good edge on it. And that's the other thing I've got to say. So it's Nitro V, and Nitro V is a good budget steel, takes a good edge, and tends to take that edge easier than you think it should, given how well it holds an edge. All right, so just very quickly here, I guess, probably most of you are familiar with the idea that edge retention is a function of a number of different things, but one of the big things is how hard that steel is. And so a harder steel generally is going to hold an edge longer, but it's also going to be harder to sharpen. Nitro V tends to sharpen up pretty quickly and easily, and yet holds that edge longer than it should, given how how easily it sharpens. And I've made this a similar comparison with S35VN and CTS-XHP. We love the older cold steels with the CTS-XHP because its performance is great. Its edge retention is better than S35VN, but it sharpens about as easily. So that's pretty impressive. And so Nitro V is in that category. Now, having said that, Nitro V is still a budget steel. It's a good budget steel, but it would have been nice to see something a little more substantial on this knife. Like I feel like the price point on this and the overall design feels like it should be S35VN to me. All right, that's just I feel we're just a little undervalued on the steel choice, and along with that, a little undervalued on the blade finish. And so we've got a blasted finish here. A nice stone wash would look a little better, and of course, if you've watched this channel for any amount of time, I much prefer satin. By far my favorite finish. I like all blades to be satin blades, but they're not, and this one isn't. And so those couple little hiccups, like Bead Blast is just a cheaper finish, and so it's like they were kind of leaning toward the budget side with the steel choice and the finish choice, and I feel like they could have done a little better to deliver a little more value. So that's my take on the blade overall. It's not bad. Don't get me wrong. It's not a bad blade at all. It's just a little, I would like to see a nicer steel on this. Next thing is the lockup. So this is a new lock, which is one of the reasons I was so curious about this, and it is good. It provides a really nice action. It's a little hard to deploy with the tripod in the way, but nonetheless, I can pull it off. I will say this has been much improved after some cleaning. So I'm going to roll some pictures in here, and I want you to notice two things. One, I want you to notice the sort of grease that they use as the lubricant when they ship these. That grease kind of gums things up a little bit and makes the action not super snappy. The other thing I want you to notice is how this lock functions. So there's kind of a tooth in here that drops up and down as you push this button. And so in that sense, in the sense that it's a tooth fitting into a slot, it kind of has a similarity with a backlock, right? In that a backlock is a solid steel tooth dropping into a hole in the blade. There's an opening in this blade that a tooth fits into as well. The mechanism is not like a backlock, but the idea of what holds the knife in place is kind of similar. Okay. Finally, last thing I want you to notice in that picture is the fact that the bearing, the washer for the bearing surface is quite large, and it's actually not a washer, it's ball bearings. I don't know why I said washer, I just guess I'm used to saying that. So the ball bearing washer, or the ball bearing pivot system, is quite large. Now, I like that because from a strength standpoint, it gives a lot of lateral stability, okay? And I've talked about this before. If I was going to stack something up and I want to go really high, do I prefer more or less overlap? Well, I want as much as I can get, right? And so you've got a big stable area with that very large bearing track, which is great, but it also means that those bearings are right out at the very edge of this handle and therefore not protected that well. And so I did a bunch of work with this knife. I was actually, cleaning the rust off of the snow tires, had this knife with me, and I took it out of my pocket to do some cutting, and then I set it down. Well, all of the rust that was in the air got into this pivot, and I mean gummed it up. It was terrible. It was really, really bad. It was gritty. It was dirty. I cleaned it like 3 times before it finally came back to a good level of functioning. And here's the bright side of that whole story. When I did all of that, it ended up functioning much better because I kind of cleaned off the grease that it ships with and switched it out for KPL. And that made everything better. The detent is snappier. The movement is much cleaner, so I'll just demonstrate. This is a pretty well a free dropping knife at this point. So that the action is much improved by cleaning out the grease and going with the KPL. Now, warning here, taking this apart is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of parts, and you got to be a little bit careful. So just be warned before you take yours apart. But on the bright side, when you do the work, you'll get much, much better performance out of the action here. This does have a secondary lock, and the idea here is, I guess, The fear is that, I don't know, I'm cutting and I'm holding the knife like this and I actually hold on the button. Well, now I can't unlock the knife. The button locks it. It'll get loose, okay, but it won't actually release until I take that lock off and then close it. The lock doesn't work to lock it closed. It's a lock open only. All right. So the action is very good. The ceramic bearings are very nice. And again, I love the stability provided by that very large washer. Just be aware that it is real, okay? All of us reviewers talked about this for years. It is a thing that gunk can get into those bearings and give you a headache and give you a bit of a hard time. All right, next let's talk about this handle. The handle is really, really nice. It's a little bit thicker, a little bit bigger, and that's going to be a complaint for some, but it's also very comfortable. So if you actually are someone who uses your knife, you're going to love this because you don't get that hand fatigue. You know, if you're using something like this Civivi, which is fairly thin, it's fine. The ergonomics, I'm not going to complain about it, but if you really have to do a lot of hard cutting with this, if you're cutting up a squash for your soup or something like that, this is going to get uncomfortable pretty quick. This, on the other hand, the Reate is going to feel great for a long, long time. Even in a hammer grip, you can really get a lot done with this. I will say there's a nice big choil here, which is big enough that you can choke up if you're careful, by the way. Wanted to point that out as we're talking about the handle and the ergonomics. This is the black aluminum handle, and there are some other options. All right, so if you don't like the black, there are a couple of G10 options, and I think there's a I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure there's a blue aluminum option as well. All right, you can see the backspacer here does not have an integrated lanyard hole. So if you're a big lanyard guy, you may not be in love with that. I don't really care that much about a lanyard, so that works fine for me. We have a pretty simple bent clip, which is reversible. And that means the knife is, comfortable-ish for a left-handed person. I can certainly use this knife left-handed, and a lot of lefties that I've talked to say that button locks work pretty well for them because you just reach over with your index finger and press the button. Okay, so it's not truly ambidextrous in that it's not like a crossbar lock where both sides are exactly the same, but it's pretty lefty friendly. All right, let's grab some comparisons here and then we'll wrap it up with some final thoughts. Okay, so comparisons, the lock is going to be quite different. There is a CRKT with a similar style lock. In terms of purpose, this is sort of a heavy duty folder. So I would compare this to something like, the Manix. You can see they're similar size. I even have a similar feel to them. On the budget end, maybe a Rat Model 1. We might throw in a cold steel American Lawman. Mine's sitting in the other room and I'm not going to go get it. But it's that style of knife. And I think in that role, it's a pretty good implementation. Okay, it's not super lightweight. It's not super slim and, lightweight carry. But that's not what it's meant to be. It's meant to be a little bit on the tougher side. And so that needs to be considered if you're going to be thinking of buying one of these. All right, let me throw in another Reate. I don't have a ton of them in my collection, but this is one of my favorite knives of all time. This is the Reate Torrent. This is a typical Reate, and this is the last point that I want to make here as we kind of wrap things up. So Reate has done, the bulk of their offerings, their bread and butter, if you will, are higher end titanium frame locks, really nice collaborations with designers. They tend to be on the expensive end of the spectrum. Beautiful knives, really well put together. Probably of the Chinese manufacturers, the best, the highest level of quality is going to be attained by Reate. And so this is a big departure in that regard because now these are going to these are coming in at a much lower price point, and that's kind of a thing. There's the Adzin that I reviewed a little while ago. There's a G10 knife from Custom Knife Factory, that's trying to do the same thing. Now, has had some budget-ish stuff already for a long time. And of course, they've had Civivi as well. But Reate is kind of new to the budget-ish end of the market. And so I'll be curious to see what else they come up with. If anyone from Reate is watching this, I think this lock is great. I really enjoy it. I suspect it necessitates a knife that's this thick, I'm sorry. So I'd love to see what else Reate comes up with in this configuration, because the lock is very enjoyable, the action is very nice, and so I could see this applying in to a number of different models. Maybe, maybe Reate, you do a Torrent 2 that's in the budget line, where it's this same footprint, but it's with this lock with some cheaper materials, and that would be, I think, a pretty interesting and rather welcome offering. I'd want to check it out anyway. So there you go, guys. Now, yeah, I guess I really didn't get to a conclusion here, which I need to do. And so overall, I really enjoy this knife. I think the lock is great. It feels really good in hand. The blade steel is a bit of a letdown, but the performance on Nitro V steel is absolutely sufficient. So this is not an inadequate knife where I feel like it's underpowered in any way. It's totally adequate for all the things that I need an EDC knife for. It's a little expensive for what it is, so that there's a hiccup there in terms of value. But if you go and try one out, I feel like this is a knife you want to get in hand. You want to spend some time with it. And so try to get your hands on this in person before making that final buying decision. There you go, guys. That's my take on the Reate PL XF. Hope you enjoyed that video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We will talk to you soon.